Once again, I hate love, and here's why. It was a perfect hot day, the kind that makes you sweat in places you didn't even know you could sweat when I found myself looking in my rearview mirror, counting the number of friends I have conceded to marriage. I once wrote in one of my stories that I hate love, and for a good reason. Whereas at that time my argument was for another reason, today I come with an entirely different one. It dawned on me that as human beings, we seem to live different lives that come at different stages of life. I flipped through my books and walked down memory lane, and on page 2003, I found that I had lost two good friends, one who I can only recall as Namatsi and another called Sheila. And when I turned to page 2004, there was Faith and Sandra. I flipped through a good number of pages in this lived life book thereafter, and they were all littered with a trail of lost friends. Many had been lost to a change of environments, while others were conceded to decisions that led each of us on different paths. As I continued to turn through the other pages of the most recent chapters, I began to notice a pattern, one that left me both worried and bemused at the same time. I had lost a good number of friends, both male and female, but predominantly female to this thing called love, and more precisely, marriage. And as I dug even deeper, my memory was drawn back to the day I witnessed and consoled a dear friend as he wept on the day her sister got married. It's not because she was going away for good, but perhaps he understood more than I could comprehend at the time that something had significantly changed. The new season was before us, and that things were never going to be the same. Her marriage was never going to make them any less of the brother and sister they already were. But he knew that the new season came with an alteration to what he had been accustomed to. I don't know who told us, taught, or even perhaps nurtured it in us that marriage should mean a loss of friends, that it should mean a moment to press one's life restart button. It's not even up for debate that marriage changes one's lifestyle in more ways than we can care to admit. Speaking to a set of married ladies at different intervals, it only reaffirmed that their life changes drastically, with all pointing out that it gets even worse once a child or children come into the picture. Is marriage the unwritten book of Revelations? Is it a rebirth into a new world that many often prefer to disguise as a season? Because I have known seasons to be shorter, and yet marriage is meant to be a lifetime. I remember a tree we had back in the village that would shade all its flowers and leaves during the dry season, so much so to the extent that it could pass for a dry one. But once we usher in the new rainy season, it would blossom with beautiful leaves as if it had not once lost all of them in the first place. So, as I looked into my rearview mirror, it dawned on me that I had been like a leaf on many friends' trees, and once the season called marriage kicked in, I was shade off. You're cut off like a distant relative who is accused of milking a cow without feeding it in the form of black tax. And if you're a sentimental person who holds friendships so dear, you may guilt trip yourself into thinking that perhaps you did something to offend the other person before being literally amputated. Unfortunately, I'm not old enough to know whether there will be a rainy season in the future that will have these trees re-blossom me as a leaf. So given that I know it not as a season, but rather a lifetime change, I have refrained myself from looking back into that rearview mirror to see whether there will be another rainy season. I'm not sure they carry the same guilt that I carry with me every time I open that locker of life. I have wondered one too many times whether they adapted quicker than I have. And then more recently, during a random counseling session with a Gen Z on one of the chat apps, an individual who identified as a first-year student at one of the universities in Kampala expressed a certain level of concern about her small circle of friends. She noted, with a pinch of disappointment, on how she had observed her relationship with the girls starting to dwindle as soon as they all started dating. Apparently, they all seem to spend more time with their boyfriends, and this has come with a few undesirable changes. I miss our routine movie nights every Friday that often culminated into sleepovers in our different rooms. She noted before going on to highlight how they had interchangeably started to missell on Tuesdays. Prayer group. It's been said to me by a career lady who in her 7th year of marriage is expecting their 3rd child that somehow they start to feel like you don't belong in more ways than one, that you now fall outside their new subset. There's an instinctive imagination that priorities have shifted in opposite directions. The goals you're working towards are now parallel. But as I sought for more satisfactory answers to my lingering questions, I stumbled onto another dynamic of this marriage conundrum. A university friend of mine, who after getting married shaved off most of her flowers and leaves, quickly found herself lonely. In a space of 5 years, she and her husband had sired 2 kids, a 4-year-old boy and a girl who is now 2. With her husband seemingly deeply buried in work, trying to fend for his family and planning for its future, she had found herself feeling lonely. As a stay-home wife/mother, raising her 2 bundles of joy had taken its toll on her and on them as a couple. Time for just the 2 of them as a couple had over time literally dried up, their conversations reduced to be only about the kids as the front page and back page stories. Like me, she lifted her eyes to see what's in her rearview mirror, and there was just a couple of friends who were also busy with work. In what she termed as a desperate attempt, she dived in her phone book and tried to reconnect with a few old friends, but many of them had moved on. Beyond the surprises, it did feel strange for some receiving a call from her after all those years, including one who had even left the country to seek greener pastures overseas. Unfortunately for her, she had equally not found rhythm with any of her neighbors to hold a conversation longer than 5 minutes, and in part proving what I have heard and perhaps observed in some way, that making new friends as an adult isn't always a cup of tea. And in the end, it was just her and her husband and the kids. Away from her sister Kevin, she felt that the kids were her only friends and company, in the good and the bad. So, should marriage be the determinant of who we keep as friends? Don't be quick to burn those bridges, because you may need them someday. Hi everyone, this is Robert K. Circles. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Give us a like on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a comment letting us know what you thought. We love hearing your feedback, and if you know someone who might enjoy the show, please share it with them. Your support means the world to me and helps us reach more listeners. Thanks again for being a part of the Robert K. Circles community. Until next time, take care.